Good morning, everybody. The final week of work. Yes. I do feel sorry for those people who are working the whole way through, but I'm less sorry for those people who already started their holiday last week. We are the ones who've stood longest this year. We will still be not, until Friday anyway. I'm going to be full of shit about it. Until Friday, I'm going to have like an attitude about the fact that I'm still at work. But after that, I'll just be joining the rest of those lazy people having a holiday. Yay! There's Flax. He is alive and well, and I know people have been asking for you to come back, so here he is. By popular demand, Michael Flax makes a return. How are you doing, Flax?
Good. I'm so excited for Friday. Literally, I'm sleeping for Friday just to be on holiday. Just close the year.
Are you guys actually shutting down on Friday? Is that your last day?
Yeah, I think like majority companies have like forced leave where the entire company closes down. And it's the first time I've taken like a proper holiday longer than like 3 days. So I'm so excited. I'm doing a road trip.
Oh, nice. We'll find out about that in a second. I just to remark on this, it's funny. We've got like a Muslim TV station underneath us in the building, and I walked in yesterday to our office, and it was like they were also on holiday. I'm like, right, this doesn't make sense, but everybody's doing like leave now, so I get it.
Yeah.
So, where's your road trip going to take you?
Oh, I'm starting off in my favorite place, the Midlands. I still think it's like a piece of heaven.
It is beautiful. You know how green that place is now?
I haven't been in about 4 or 5 months, so I'm so excited. Crack of dawn on Friday, I'm going straight through.
You taking the girlfriend, or is it just you?
No, going with my girlfriend.
Nice.
Yeah, we're very excited for a road trip.
Are you going to be staying in hotels and B&Bs and all that kind of thing?
Yep. Taking the Jimny and just meander through the Midlands.
That sounds beautiful. There are two kinds of people when it comes to this. So the people who plan every last detail. They know exactly where they're staying. They know how many nights the trip is. They've got like a map. They've got a number of days in each place, that kind of thing. Or they're those people who just go, right, leaving on Friday, got to be back a week later maybe, and we're going to stop wherever we're interested in stopping. Which kind are you?
Oh, definitely not that kind. I have to, as long as I book accommodation, I'm good. I just have to have somewhere to sleep. Those people that will rock up into a country and not have a place to sleep and then start looking or missioning and booking, that is anxiety on the next level. I cannot do that.
I'm the same. I admire people who can do that though. I've got a friend who, like, he'll go somewhere and make it up as he goes. He'll like decide, all right, well, I've got, I don't know, 2 weeks of leave. I've got X amount of money. I'm just going to do whatever I want. And I could never, I would never relax. Like, it would be frightening for me to contemplate the idea of just total, like, open-ended, whatever happens stuff. I can't do it, but I love the idea that there are people like that. And I think there are more people like us who plan everything, but I have such admiration for those who don't. Maybe just because I'm jealous.
You need some form of planning. Like, you don't have to plan the entire holiday, but you've got to get the foundation of your bookings on where you're sleeping at least down. And then you can wake up and plan activities. But if you don't have where you're sleeping, your entire holidays, I mean, to me, it looks like your entire holiday is going to be a stress ball.
Yeah. Almost like the story of Jesus's parents who just like wandered around trying to find an inn to give birth to Jesus in. It makes me nervous, Cheryl says, I don't do any planning. I would rather just take me where the wind takes me. Give me good company and a map. You see, like that's what Cheryl's exactly the kind of person I'm talking about. I kind of envy it. Maybe it's just because I'm
it would be cool to try. Like, imagine just rocking up in a city or country and just being, where am I going to stay? Start planning from there. It sounds cool. Yeah. The thought of it gives me anxiety.
So Shani has an interesting idea here. She says, Flax, go to the Sani Pass and Underberg. South Drakensberg is heaven. Switzerland, Scotland, and Africa all in one. I have not been to any of those places in the southern Drakensberg, and it sounds beautiful. The way people describe it, it just sounds absolutely amazing. And I've seen pictures, from friends who've been there and that kind of thing. I've got to go there.
I can highly recommend Sani Pass. That if you have a 4x4 or a little Jimny, that is one of the coolest drives you'll ever go on in your car.
Nice.
I'm keeping Sani Pass for next year when it starts snowing. Then I want to go up Sani Pass, spend some time in I've just gone blank on the name.
Lesotho?
Lesotho.
Yeah. Yesterday we were joking about like chimneys because all the ANC bigwigs who lost at this conference over the weekend, they're all going to have to, obviously their tenders will be cancelled now because they backed the wrong side. So they're going to have to cancel their very, very expensive Land Rover Vogue orders and go for a Jimny instead. which is what people were saying all day yesterday. And we were joking about it yesterday with Jason Goliath on the show. So we shall see. Corona's Boring says, I've done so much traveling around South Africa, I can wing it the whole way. Wow. In fact, I could do it without a phone. That's impressive.
Those people amaze me. Those that don't need maps, that can literally travel the roads of South Africa with just remembering that they've been down this road and this now turns onto a dirt road. Phenomenal.
Yeah. No, that is something. I look at my two little nephews who my brother and sister-in-law are like they manic about traveling. I've never ever seen two people have so many holidays in a year easily, like one every month. And I don't know how they get it right. I mean, my brother has a serious job. He just manages to get away. And these two kids have seen every corner of South Africa. I'm so jealous of them because, and not in a like seriously jealous way. I think it's great that they get to see all of this. But when I was 20, I still hadn't seen as much of the country as they have, and they're not even 10 years old, the two of them. So I think that's great to explore this country. And I also think there'll be those kind of people, like, the sort of people that Tracy's talking about and that Corona's Boring's talking about.
You get people that are quick to leave South Africa for a holiday because they don't actually realize the beauty that's on our doorstep. Like,
absolutely.
I'm going to this place and I've only spent a night there before. And now I'm spending more time there just to explore. But St. Lucia, and it has so much to do there. And its backstory and everything is like ridiculously cool at being a wetland.
And isn't it? Yeah, it's like a wildlife preserve as well. So they've got all that wetland area, which is very well protected and conserved. And they've got lots of bird and animal life. And, it's a really spectacular part of South Africa. It's probably one of our best unspoilt sort of slices of the country. It's magnificent.
Anyway, so safari on the left and ocean on the right.
So how long are you going for altogether?
Oh, only like a week.
No. See, I also have this problem. I don't know if it's a problem. You tell me. I can't really do long holidays. I can do the longest I've ever done is 10 days, and that almost kills me, even when it's overseas and you paid for expensive flights and that kind of thing. You get there, and I like a short holiday. I like a 5 days, 6 days. That's good enough for me. And then for the rest of the time that I've got off, I just want to sit at home and do nothing. And I know it'll fill up with like seeing friends or fixing things around the house or like going to visit family or whatever. So it's always going to be filled up with stuff. It's not like I'm just going to sit around and do nothing all day. But I mean, waking up late is obviously something I spoke about yesterday, that the holidays give me the only opportunity I have to wake up late. Because even this year, if I think about it, I took 2 weeks off the show, 1 week when I was in Mexico and 1 week when I was in Turkey. But otherwise, I've pretty much woken up, 5:30 to 5:30 every morning this whole year. And I'm not the only one. There are lots of people who do that. So I'm really looking forward to just lying in bed until I feel like getting up, which is which is the best. Hey, did you watch the World Cup final on Sunday?
I did. That was a phenomenal match.
Did you see the footage from Buenos Aires, the Argentinian capital?
No.
Oh
Of when
my
they
God.
arrived or of people watching them?
I'm not sure if this is when the team arrived back or whether it was just Monday when people just took to the streets to celebrate. But what the video I'm about to show you now is not CGI because you think it's a movie. You think it's like they've made almost like a zombie movie because you can't imagine this many people in one place celebrating the victory of the World Cup. But this just shows you how soccer mad Argentina and how long they've been waiting for this celebration. I mean, I'm just this almost brought tears to my eyes. Watch this. I don't know how great the video is, on our screen this morning, but I'm going to try and give you the best version of it I can. Just take a look at this. It is mind blowing. It doesn't even look real.
That's insane.
It's unreal, right? So if anybody wasn't watching and just listening to the podcast, it's millions of people on the streets of the capital of Argentina. It is unreal to see. And by the way, I mean, like, it's probably one of the best kind of boulevards I've seen in any city in terms of urban planning. There's space for everybody, which is phenomenal.
Yeah.
What an insane thing. If that isn't, I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't real, but I mean, it looks to me to be 100% real.
No, that has to be real. That is mad. Like spirit and pride, right?
I've never seen anything like it. So when someone sent it to me, I was like, this can't be. But it turns out it is. Obviously, they clipped, they dubbed the sound over the clip. But yeah, it is real. It's so great. And we often say we're soccer mad in this country, and perhaps we are, but nothing like that. Nothing like
Imagine being like Lionel Messi. You've literally won everything. You are the greatest in what you do.
You know what, Flax? I think that's about the closest you can get to being worshipped as a god on earth.
And like self-actualization.
Oh my God. Well, I mean, listen, if you someone was telling me the story of Messi and how, when he was a kid growing up, I think in Rosario, which is the little town they grew up in, he grew up in poverty. His parents couldn't afford to send him for this operation because he was, stunted. He hadn't grown properly and he needed this growth hormone and like extensive treatment to be able to grow. And Barcelona discovered him because he'd been playing football as a kid. And apparently he was so talented as a small child already that when he would kick a ball around with his friends, people would stop and watch as a like 7, 8-year-old kid. And then Barcelona found out about him. And I think they signed him up at like age 12. And he got all this treatment that he needed. So he grew to, I think he's, just over 5.5 foot or whatever. So he's not a tall guy. You've seen him, but if he hadn't had that treatment, he wouldn't have grown and he wouldn't have ever been the footballer that he is. And that whole story is it's a beautiful, beautiful story. There's a similar kind of story with Mbappe, whose father played for Cameroon, but in Africa, it's really hard to get a good football contract if you sign up to an African team because there's just a lot of corruption, especially in a place like Cameroon. And so he decided, his dad decided, I'm taking you to France and we will get you signed up there because he could tell his kid was talented. And, you see these two people who were in the World Cup final, these two superstars. And, Mbappe's on the way up and Lionel Messi is just at the top of that mountain. He's He's the most famous footballer ever, and it's just beautiful to watch. Beautiful to watch. And then somebody brings this up. Nico says, how dumb was that Salt Bay fucker? So Salt Bay is that dude who did that thing with the meat and like became famous on the internet. Now, for some reason, I think he's got a restaurant in Qatar or something, but he was on the pitch for some reason on Sunday night when they won. And he was like walking around trying to force himself into photographs with the whole Argentine team. And he was like pulling, this is all over TikTok and Instagram and everything. And he was like pulling people by the arm, and like you could see everybody was really annoyed with him. He was like such a hanger-on.
People said he was harassing Messi.
What's that turd doing on the? I mean, like of all the people in the whole world to be, do you really think football fans give a shit about the Salt Bay dude? What a strange thing to have him on the field. Really,
he stood out because he wasn't even in a football jersey. He was in a like 3-piece suit on the field, just wanting photos with everyone.
What an idiot! I still had to. Look, someone sent me the video, and I was watching it, going, "Who is that guy?" Because he was famous for 15 minutes, 5-6 years ago, And apparently, he's got like restaurants all over the Middle East, and people go there just to see him put salt on the meat or whatever, chop it up or, whatever. And they pay like unbelievable amounts of money to have him actually come to their table and serve them. And I have to think, like, how empty and sad is your life if that's who you want to meet, the Salt Bay. Someone who's become like an internet meme. Is that really someone you want to meet? What would you pay to meet? What would you pay out of your own money to meet the Salt Bay?
Oh, no, I wouldn't pay a single cent. There's not a single cent I pay.
Same here.
He's an internet sensation. He just did something with some salt over some steak, and people found it cool, and he became a meme.
Yeah.
It's not like an influential person or someone that's going to change my life.
Big news. I know you're interested in this too, because we can't stop talking about this guy. He must also be feeling like a god on earth. But Elon Musk apparently tweeted out, when was it, over the weekend, I think, that he would step down as Twitter CEO if he lost a poll. He basically said to people, should I step down as CEO of Twitter? Now, he lost the poll, not by that much. It was 50-something to 40-something. So not a huge split. But I mean, he owns the company, and he's basically saying to people, I'm turning this into a free speech platform. There are a lot of people who are complaining about him and saying, he's really the enemy of free speech. But he's all for transparency. So I don't care what your politics are. If you just look at the fact that he's releasing all this information about how Twitter works behind the scenes, all this shadow banning that was going on, all that kind of thing, you don't have to agree with Elon. You don't even have to like Elon. A lot of people have a major problem with him. I think a lot of it comes from jealousy because he's having so much fun.
Yeah.
But I think he's also under pressure because Tesla and SpaceX are struggling a little bit. Their share price has dropped hugely since he's taken his eye off the ball there. And I think he needs to get back into kind of managing his other businesses as well. He's having a lot of fun with Twitter. But he put up this poll. People voted that he should step down as CEO, and he's apparently going to do it. This morning, the news is that he's going to find a replacement, and then he's going to leave the CEO role at Twitter. I mean, what'll piss a lot of people off is he may even put in someone who's got more radical views than he does. But the one thing that he's going to insist on, apparently, is transparency. So people will know. They'll know when they've been banned. They'll know why. There'll be good reasons for things. It'll seemingly be run in a much more open manner than the way it has been. And we were openly lied to by the previous management at Twitter. They were saying there's no such thing as shadow banning. Meanwhile, they were doing exactly that. I mean, I saw, even though I haven't been active on Twitter, I went on and had a look the other day. I've gone up, despite doing nothing in the last 2 years on Twitter, except really like mention our podcasts. I've done nothing else. I've gone up by like 100 or 200,000 followers.
Jeez.
In that time without doing anything. And I don't think it's because those followers suddenly came back now. I think it's because they were always there, but Twitter was hiding them. or they won't give me the kind of reach that I probably was really getting organically, because maybe they just didn't like what I was saying, and I used to say some pretty outrageous stuff on Twitter back in the day. Anyway, Sanele says the Salt Bay is now the footballer thirsty bay. What do you think about this Elon Musk thing? I mean, I know you're a fan.
Very ballsy. Like it's sort of like that putting your money where your mouth is. But
yeah,
I don't know if you saw a couple of weeks back, or maybe like a month or two back, Mr. Beast tweeted Elon Musk and was like, "If you give up the company, can I have it?" And Elon Musk said, "Okay." Literally just replied, "Okay." So everyone started speculating if Mr. Beast is going to get Twitter. Not the end of the world, would actually probably be a phenomenal thing, since Mr. Beast created his own YouTube account and grew it into the biggest YouTube account in the world, or one of. And I think he's generated already just under $1 billion from his YouTube channel alone. And he's got a few channels. So if he was to get it, it would be like this new revelation and a new style of CEO. And it might actually be great for the platform, putting fun back in Twitter.
There's a lot of speculation. Some people are saying that he's already chosen his successor, and this was just a way for him to play a game with the audience and kind of get people interested. I don't think it matters, but it is going to be a tough job for whoever steps into it. This is not a fun job. This is going to be really hard.
For Elon Musk. I've only heard that it's like he works you to the bone.
Yeah, I think whoever it is, they'll last very, very short, a very short period of time. It's going to be tough. It's not going to be fun. You're going to be managing so many interests. People are going to love you. People are going to hate you. There's huge pressure, and I don't see any upside really, unless he'll probably pay quite a lot of money, but. You who wants that kind of attention, and who wants that kind of responsibility right now? Because people all believe Twitter belongs to them. Everybody thinks it's my Twitter. So you're just going to run up.
For Elon Musk though, like you can never be like him. He's one in a trillion. He's a freaking genius, and now you can try to live up to his expectations.
I listened to a podcast with a bunch of guys who are very in, the whole tech and Silicon Valley world. And they were all saying that they believe that he's probably one of the smartest, most productive, most forward-thinking people in the world and of our generation. And they are concerned that he's wasting his potential at a business like Twitter, which is really just like, a noise bag. It's just a place where people just all make noise. And really, he should focus the biggest part of his attention on, getting us to Mars and developing new technologies for cars and all that kind of thing. And if he can do that, that would be a better use of his time. But of course, it's up to him. And I've never seen anyone have as much fun as this guy has had since he took over Twitter. He's just every day he's trolling people, he's laughing, he's posting funny things, he's replying to people all over the world. I think the guy's having so much fun. He's very reluctant to step back, but he's probably got to take responsibility now at some point. He's had a lot of fun this year, and now it's back to the work. Just quickly talking about, soccer a moment ago, and like people getting crazy and drunk at this time of year, and sport, and sports fans will find any reason to get excited. Some people are excited about that cricket that gets played around Boxing Day. But check this guy out. This is a South African dude who celebrates after, I think, one of the goals in the World Cup is scored. And then he runs to jump in the pool, but he runs face first into a glass door. Have you seen this clip?
No.
Jeez, this is hilarious. Just watch this. Passes out cold. It's hilarious.
Yeah, he went full speed into that door. That door didn't exist to him.
No, it's very bad. Oh my God. All right. A lot of people commenting on yesterday's show. We had lots of fun with Jason Goliath. He was hilarious. We talked about all the things people are going to be doing in December and all the things that you should not do in December. So it was pretty funny. Twitter has always been an intelligence operation. Plenty of ex-FBI operatives were among those fired. I didn't know that. It's funny. There are always going to be people who will find some, deep state intelligence operation story and everything. And maybe you're right. Maybe I'm the naive idiot who doesn't think that that's happening. But I don't know. Maybe he'll be giving out golden tickets hidden in Neuralink purchases, and you can select a CEO from there. It's almost like Charlie in the Chocolate Factory.
That Neuralink is a genius company. I'm still skeptical if it even works, but he claims it does.
Well, would you be one of the first people to try it? That's always the question.
I'm such an Elon Musk fan. I'll do whatever the guy wants. He wants to go to Mars. Let's go to Mars. I think he's solving our problems on Earth.
Yeah. I know that a lot of people planning their holidays, it seems amazing to me that apparently they're just the same number of cars going through all the toll gates as every other December. But I don't know what people want to go to the beach for if you can't swim in some of these beaches. Some people are just disregarding the warnings, the health warnings, and saying, oh, well, we're going to swim anyway. And apparently there are lots of people on, various beaches in KZN, even in the Cape, where there have been some warnings about like sewage spilling into the ocean. We spoke about this on Monday. I would not go near the sea if there were human turds floating around in it. And I know that the sea's always got like shit in it and, humans dump all their crap into the sea. I get it. But I would like to think that the beaches that I've been to in my life have been mostly clean. And if it wasn't, then I just wouldn't swim. But how are these people who just go in anyway? Would you?
No. If I think this December, because I'm heading towards KZN, I have to check like every day which beaches are open and warnings and that. But I don't know how we got in this mess. Like, surely the beaches are part of what makes South Africa amazing and an amazing holiday destination.
Especially those KZN beaches. I mean, what's one of the most important reasons to go to the Natal coast is for those beautiful beaches and for, you can swim in the water. And that's one of the things I used to love as a kid going on holiday. And even as an adult, I don't get why you would go there if you can't get in the sea.
And the water's warm. I'd like to think that our government and everyone has put in precautions for sewage not exploding and going into the ocean and some infrastructure to protect the ocean. But it sounds like it's an afterthought.
Yeah, bad luck, I'm afraid. They definitely are not prioritizing any of that shit. So I hate to break it to you, but if you were hoping our government gave a shit about an infrastructure, especially in KZN, they don't. They're still the deputy mayor of eThekwini, who's like a crook, second to none. So don't hold your breath. In fact, no, hold your breath in case you open your mouth and swallow a turd. That's kind of what you need to know.
How do you even go about fixing this? Does it just flush out from the ocean, or is there active methods you have to do?
Supposedly, the ocean is a self-cleaning mechanism, but if you're constantly pouring shit in, then the areas around that shit are going to take a very long time to get better. So it's a question of time. Apparently, so someone sent me a screenshot of the reports where they do these E. coli tests on the ocean in various places, and they check the beaches, and there's like a scientist who goes down there and samples the stuff and puts it under a microscope and tells you what's in it. So apparently there are parts of the beaches that have been closed that are now open again, and they say that they are recovering very slowly, and you're pretty safe to swim in some areas. But I don't know. I mean, just the idea of like raw sewage being emptied into the ocean doesn't make me very happy. And I think it changes the whole quality of the place. This time of year should be it should be insane on those beaches. It should be packed with people lying in the sun, people swimming in the sea, people playing games on the beach. All of that stuff should be part of December in South Africa. And I saw a picture of Umhlanga Beach the other day, and it's just empty. It's like
Really?
it's like a ghost town, which is just horrible. You think that that's like one of the most popular beaches in the country. Cheryl says
That's so
Fishhook is
sad.
now open. That was the one they closed in the Western Cape, but I still don't trust it. The prawns and the crayfish must be thriving. Yeah, prawns and crayfish eat a lot of that stuff.
Really? They eat like sewage
Mm.
and things.
Oh, they eat all the shit at the bottom of the sea, I'm afraid.
Oh, that might put me off prawns and crayfish.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of prawns and crayfish. I went to a friend's party in Cape Town not so long ago. He was a big celebration, and he invited friends from all over the country, and even some people from over the world flew in. And we had a real blast. I mean, I sampled 30 different kinds of tequila in one day. Can you imagine the kind of
Oh,
afternoon
nice.
luckily, we started at 3 in the afternoon, so I decided somewhere around 9:45 it was time to go to the hotel and sleep it off, which I did. But what a day! And then they were serving beautiful food, but they brought along these little crayfish things, and I've never liked crayfish, but for some reason I decided to try one. And you know when you put something in your mouth and you instantly go, "Ugh, it was a mistake."
Well, you still
And
got to
now,
swallow.
well, now you're around people, so you can't exactly go "Ugh," and throw it out into your hand and excuse yourself and go to the bathroom and like run out of the room. It was very, very good, but I'm just not a crayfish guy. I just can't. There's a lot of that shellfish that I can't eat. I just don't like it. I don't like the taste. It's like it's like that very fishy taste, which I know some people like. I just don't. It's not my thing.
Like straight from the ocean taste. You can still get that salt in the sea and whoo.
No, I don't like it. It's not my thing. Tracy's just brought something up, which I saw yesterday. You know, we talked about 3 guys this morning. Well, this will be the third, who are just loving their lives at the moment. So one is Elon Musk, the other one is Lionel Messi, and the other one is definitely Tom Cruise. He did the stunt in South Africa. He was apparently above one of our beaches, jumped out of a plane. And he drove some motorcycle off a cliff with a parachute attached to him. I mean, this guy he does his own stunts, and how old is Tom Cruise now? I keep forgetting. Because if you look at him, you don't think he's, let me just see. Let me see how old he is. It's just,
I rate he's 55.
dude, he is 60 years old.
Jeez.
Tom Cruise. So
still going strong.
He's in this video, and he basically did it to thank all the fans of Mission Impossible. He's being filmed as he's about to jump out of this plane, wearing the goggles. And what a guy. I mean, just what a guy. He's probably going to go down in history as one of the best movie stars of all time ever.
Without a doubt. Definitely.
And he did this incredible video where he jumps out of the plane. And Tracy says, that guy's unreal. I'm not a fan of his Scientology, but bloody hell, he's a hardcore dude, all while having fun. Yeah, couldn't agree more. These 3 guys that we mentioned this morning, I mean, don't they make you feel like such an underachiever? Like they're all doing just the most amazing. And Lionel Messi just won the World Cup after a career which is mind-bogglingly successful. You know, Elon Musk, the richest dude in the world, who's like on a Twitter poll handing over control of his company to a new CEO this week. You've got Tom Cruise jumping out of planes to celebrate Mission Impossible 7 and thanking all his fans. I mean, these people are living their lives. Just makes the rest of us feel, oh yeah, no, you know, I had a nice holiday. Yeah, saw some mates. We had a big party for New Year. Yeah, like Jesus.
I like was a bra.
Oh man.
I saw Elon Musk actually isn't the richest person in the world anymore. He was overtaken by the guy that owns Louis Vuitton.
Really?
That's now richest man in the. Imagine being the one in the entire world on this entire planet. You are the one that has the most. You've built the most. That is ridiculous.
Well, good for him. I mean, listen, it always changes, right? You're never the richest man in the world for a very long time. I think Bill Gates, it could have been Bill Gates, still had the record for the longest period at the top. But when you get to that kind of money, it's just ridiculous. You know, you're talking hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, to those guys, if you go up or down by 2 or 3 billion in a day based on your stocks and shares. It's a lot to us, but to them, it's like, oh well, we're just riding this wave.
I was watching a documentary on Christo Vissa, and he starts explaining how someone asked him, like, how does it feel to be so wealthy? And he's like, after you've made a couple billion, like making more billion after that doesn't have an effect. It just keeps adding up. And you stop focusing on the money and you start focusing on other things and what you can do with it and how you can help South Africa, etc. And I think I like his mentality. Like you make a cutoff point and you stop focusing on the money after that and start focusing on the good you can do and the life you want to live and the legacy you want to leave.
Like, how do you feel the difference between like $5 and $8 billion? It doesn't. It's to the rest of us. This is just, it's paper money. It just sounds ridiculous. It is. It's kind of crazy. It's someone once said to me, just for example, you compare a house, and we've done this on the show before. You compare a house for 10 million rand and a house for 100 million rand. There's not that much difference. It's maybe the view or the location or what street this house is in, and maybe the one has got an extra 2 seats in its indoor cinema, and the other one's got a slightly bigger pool. But like the difference between a 10 million and 100 million rand house is arbitrary. It depends on things that you can't actually say, well, this is why it's 10 times more expensive. Because once you've got all of these things in a house, then that's it, right?
True.
So I don't know how it works. Anyway, listen, a couple of people talking about the beaches. Apparently, Lindy says Phuket stinks, literally. Sis. Cheryl says Cape Town beaches are bad. Firstly, it's so windy, full gale force in the evenings. Then you have the shit laying around. So that's very sad that this is what our beaches look like. This is where you want to jump on like Greta Thunberg's bandwagon and say we've got to start looking after the earth. Flax, you are funny, says Ricky. People love
thank you.
AZN has blue bag status, a checkers packet on every beach. Oh my God. Morning, everyone. Let's have a drink every time the power goes off, says Jared. Well, Jared will be drunk every day, first thing in the morning.
It is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. I don't trust Durban, says Matthew. Something looks fishy. Surf and turd, says Steve. Yeah. I'm not sure how we got into this mess. How old are you, Flax, says DK. You know how we got into this mess. It's politicians.
30.
No. But you don't let the politicians into your reality too often. I know you.
No, but I think they could be doing more in terms of fixing the beaches and making sure something like this doesn't happen. I think this should be a priority, especially in this silly season where people are going to the beaches. People have literally waited the entire year to go and swim, and now you've just wasted their holiday because you've cut the beaches out.
Oh, it's Bernard Arnault, who is the richest man, 172.9 billion. Elon at 168.5 billion. That's just, like 168 versus 172. What's the difference, really? And Bernard Arnault is a very, very interesting man. I mean, that whole family also, the luxury goods business, it just shows you, all those people who buy Louis Vuitton stuff. And listen, you do what you want with your money. It's not my business. But you are not making any statement about how rich you are. All you're doing is making that man the richest man in the world. And good for him that he can sell expensive shit to dumb people. That's where you make money. You don't have to, he's not selling Louis Vuitton stuff to poor people, is he? He's selling that stuff that he sells, particularly through that company, to the richest people in the world. Because, a bag costs you what? Thousands and thousands of rands. You can't get anything in the Louis Vuitton store for what, under 30, 40 grand. And I mean, you'll get a keychain or something for that kind of money. So he's selling expensive shit to rich people, and he's still making such huge profits that he can now call himself the richest man in the world. That's phenomenal. Ricky says, if we drink with the power going off, we will be sober because the power has to be on first for it to go off. Okay, good point. And
I
also,
don't know.
yesterday with Jason, we were talking about how expensive alcohol is at the moment. I mean, if you're a serious drinker, and a lot of South Africans are, like that guy who ran into the glass door, you have to have a big, deep wallet. Forget about going to Louis Vuitton and buying a bag. You need to be rich just to buy alcohol in this country at the moment. It's so expensive.
Alcohol is very expensive. Maybe it already is classified as a luxury. It should be the last thing you buy.
Well, I wonder how much really expensive premium stuff was drunk after the ANC conference this week, because Mash said he went past a certain venue and he said he saw a lot of these ANC types drinking, like, Johnny Blue and even more expensive whiskeys than that, ordering bottles.
What was that all about? Because I saw that Cyril got re-elected. They gave seats.
Okay, you want to know? So let's take a look at this quickly. I'm going to spend the minimum of time going over this, but here's what you need to know.
Summary.
Yeah, because otherwise people will say, "Oh, you guys don't give us any news." So here's the news. All right, I'll put this up on the screen. This is basically everything you need to know about the ANC elective conference. So they elected a president. There were 4 spoiled ballots. There were 7 abstentions. Zweli Mkhize got 1,897 votes. Cyril got 2,475. So Cyril Ramaphosa became the president. Okay, that's what that tells you. So he's re-elected as president of the ANC. Now, this is important, obviously, because the president of the ANC gets to determine how other people further down the tree do or do not receive patronage, do or do not receive positions, are or are not high up on the party list, etc. Deputy president. What's that?
Who's voting? Because these numbers are low, like 2,000 votes.
Yeah, it's only the ANC branch members. So it's their elective conference. Each branch sends a delegate or 2, as I understand it, and then they all vote. That's why they had to do it in Nasrec. So they've got space for like 4,000 or 5,000 people. Anyway, deputy president, Paul Mashatile was elected with 2,178 votes. So that's a lot less than Cyril, but he's still in there. And he replaces Didi Mabuza, who's been the most useless. I mean, do you even know who David Mabuza is, Flax?
No.
Did you ever hear? He was our deputy president for the last 4 or 5 years. So
never heard from him.
I know. Nobody has. Nobody cares. And basically he spent most of his time like flying to Russia for suspicious things. Chairperson of the ANC, also an important position, goes to Gwede Mantashe. Secretary General is now Fikile Mbalula, which is unbelievable. Then you got the first, because they've now got 2 deputy secretary generals. I don't know what they do, but both of them are people who I don't know very much about the second one, the second deputy secretary general, but she's young, Marupini Ramakgopa, who got 2,372 votes, not bad. And Nomvula Mokonyane is the new first deputy secretary general. She's the failed minister of water affairs, and before that, a failed member of the provincial government of Gauteng. So just she's a terrible candidate, but what are you going to do? We don't get to decide on these people. The ANC does. And then Gwen Ramakgopa is the treasurer general. So that's the ANC's top 7, because they used to be a top 6, but now they're the top 7. So that's what they went there and did. Basically, that's all that matters. They don't really discuss any policy. It's all just about jockeying for position. So everybody in the country who paid attention to that, what you were watching is a popularity contest inside the ANC. I hope you feel like you spent your time effectively, because
we just watched them organize their company internally.
Correct, but it's not a company. So it's not like they discussed like the future of the company and the vision and where they're going and what they want to do for South Africa. They're just like, we're electing these people to be at the top of the food chain so that the rest of us can get some cash. That's really what it is.
Can that change like throughout the year, or is it done once a year?
No, so this is done, I think it's done every 4, maybe even 5 years. So it's quite it's quite a big deal.
These people hold the position for 5 years.
Yeah, I think so. I stand to be corrected. I used to pay a lot more attention to this stuff, Flax. I don't actually know the answer to that question. I'm not going to try and answer it. I think it's every 5 years, but if anybody who's
Hmm.
listening knows better, let us know. All right. Some other news that you need to know about. Apparently, vendors are frustrated after disappointing profits at the ANC's 55th conference. So, so there's always going to be someone who loses and someone who wins. Apparently, the ANC is winding down for several small business owners outside of the Nasrec Expo Center in Joburg. Many said they did not make a profit over the past 5 days of the conference. Yo, I never made anything, brother. The ANC has failed us, said one vendor. The conference is not the same as the previous one. Some party delegates said this was indicative of how tough it was for South Africans at the moment. I don't believe that for a second because these guys are not struggling. There's no one in the ANC who's struggling, not in those positions. Many vendors said they hoped that the newly re-elected ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa would re-energize and support small businesses and the township economy. Well, if you guys believe that, you've got another thing coming. But that's interesting news out of there. And then there's always a story or two at this time of year about animals behaving badly or about humans getting fucked up by animals. So apparently, in the Kruger National Park, a South African national park's field ranger was airlifted to hospital after sustaining severe injuries in an elephant attack. Sandpark spokesperson Isaac Patla said the incident happened during a morning patrol on Tuesday at the Pretorius-Kop section of the Kruger National Park. The ranger's colleagues rescued him by firing a warning shot, causing the elephant to run off. He was airlifted to hospital. Head Ranger Catherine Dreyer said the field rangers are constantly exposed to danger. She added she was relieved the ranger wasn't fatally wounded, but apparently he's been quite badly injured. So he will be in hospital recovering over Christmas.
Let me tell you, an elephant on must is not something you want to mess with. That is an angry, angry bull.
Hell no. Very, very bad. And don't just do me a favor over these holidays, especially if you're going to be in the bush or you're going to be around wild animals, just leave them alone. Just stay away from them. You can watch them from a distance, and this is what a lot of people pay big money from overseas to come and do in this country. But please don't interfere with the animals, because when you get trodden on or, chased or bitten or eaten or anything, I'm not going to feel sorry for you. Sorry.
I was recently in the game reserve, and we were on a game drive, night drive, and we came across a bull on must. And the game ranger goes, guys, he's going to challenge and charge us. And this bull was maybe like a couple 100 meters away. Struce Bob, about 5 seconds later, looks at us and starts charging us. And the game ranger says, I need to challenge him. Apparently that's how you get like rid of them, and their anger is you challenge them back, and then they don't see you as a threat. So he starts like revving our engine, screaming at the bull, trying to get him to the side of the car. And then the bull comes to the side of the car, which was a really good move because it allowed us to go forward. But then he like tried to charge us again, and his tusk like hit the game vehicle. So it was way too close for comfort. And the game ranger just put his foot flat on the accelerator, and we took off. But you could know this bull was going to then charge us down, thinking we were a threat.
Just these guys got to leave these animals alone. I've seen horrible videos. You've probably seen them too. These videos of these game drive vehicles being turned over by an elephant. Have you seen what elephants can do to trees? You really think they're gonna have trouble with a crappy Land Rover game vehicle? Come on,
they'll destroy you in a second.
Definitely. And it's not worth it.
They don't know what you are, so they perceive you as a threat. I think my game ranger was telling us that when an elephant looks at a game vehicle, all they see is a square box. Their eyesight sees a square box, and that's it. They don't see with what's in it. So if someone runs out of it, they see another object now. That's why you should never
run. Corona's Boring says, has Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma immigrated to New Zealand? I see they're banning tobacco. They're banning tobacco in New Zealand? Banning it outright? Jesus, that is some nanny state, hey? New Zealand, now you're not allowed to smoke. They're actually going to ban it. Unbelievable. That's Jacinda Ardern's government. Good Lord. If that's true, what a disaster. I mean, I'm no fan of smoking, but you don't imagine your government decides what you can and can't do. You can drink this,
Mm.
you can't drink that. You can eat this, you can't eat that. You can't smoke this, you can smoke. Who do these bureaucrats, these are elected officials, who do they think they are? They're going to say, "Oh no, but it's good for your health." It's it's not your decision to make. People, what is the point? I don't understand, and this is something I didn't understand during COVID either. What is the point of everybody trying to live longer if you've got an unhappy and miserable life? If your life is shit and the only happiness you get is lighting up that cigarette or having a drink every night when you get home or at the end of the week or whatever, let people have their happiness, right? What what do you want them to live to 110 because they haven't smoked or had a drink in their life? And by the way, that there's no proof at all that people who don't drink and don't smoke live longer or live shorter lives. People say, well, there's a bit higher chance of cancer. Yeah, of course. But there's absolutely no evidence to show that on an anecdotal level, people who live longer have led healthier lives by every measure. Something's going to kill you. May as well be something you like, right? I mean, you
I used
decide
to
if you want to live. If you want to live a happy life and you want to live forever and you want to be as healthy as possible, then sure, drink water. Don't eat anything that's sweet. Only have like steamed vegetables. Run half marathons 3 times a year. You're going to look like biltong and you're going to have a very unhappy social life and no one's going to want to be around you. But you'll live a long time. Great. Good for you. I think there's a balance here. I think like you've got to have a bit of both. You got to let loose sometimes. You've got to occasionally eat something that's not good for you. You've occasionally got to drink something that you know you're going to get a hangover from. I think that's part of life.
In my old house, there was a granny flat, and in the granny flat lived a 93-year-old lady. She was like full corpus mentis, loving life, living her best life. And she
Yeah.
used to smoke and drink like there's no tomorrow, like probably a box a day, half a gin a day. Every time
Wow.
she went to the doctor, they said, "No, you're tip top shape. Your lungs are perfect." And I've never seen someone smoke and drink like that. I'm not condoning smoking and
No,
drinking.
sure.
I'm just telling you her story.
I can't believe that. I just like what kind of government has the gall to tell people, we're going to ban tobacco outright? I mean, do you really think that's going to solve the problem? You don't think people are going to trade on the underground? All you're going to do is push up the price of cigarettes. Look what happened here in South Africa. As soon as they banned cigarettes during the lockdown, remember at the beginning, it
Mm.
became a huge commodity, and the crooked underground cigarette business took off like you can't believe. Right?
People still smoke.
Of course they
This
will.
isn't going to stop them. They're just going to find other ways. It's a habit.
It's insane. Uh, Zandi says, Gareth, as I'm driving into Kruger, you come up with an elephant story. Sorry, Zandi. Just be careful, all right?
The Kruger must be boiling this time of year. I've never been in December, but I heard it is so hot.
Mm-hmm. I spoke to a friend of mine last week who is going camping with some friends this week. They're going there for Christmas in somewhere like Bella Bella, whereas, it's also hot as can be. And if you don't have a pool or you don't have aircon, don't know why you'd want to put yourself through that. Anyway, my gran was 90 years old and she smoked and did not die from smoking. Something, that's what I say. Something's going to get you. And I just love the way like some of these people who've led these extraordinarily healthy lives. And I know that, obviously the statistics will bear out that if you try to live a healthy life and you eat properly, don't drink and you exercise regularly, you will probably live longer. And I'm absolutely sure that the statistics show that people who do those kinds of things do on average live longer. But I love these stories about people who break those rules. People who are like they've got to their late 90s and they're in perfect health, or they're in reasonably good health for a 90-year-old. They still have all their faculties about them mentally, physically, and they drank and smoked. I'm like Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones is just always the perfect example, right? That guy's going to live forever. And
What about
he has
Ozzy Osbourne?
Ozzy Osbourne. Oh my God. I mean, these people, like Ozzy Osbourne's not all there mentally anymore. He's a completely deranged human being. He's like mutters to himself the whole time and everything else. But don't tell me he hasn't had a great life. Would you rather want Ozzy Osbourne's life or the life of that person who you pass by in the shop who has done nothing interesting in their whole lives, has never been anywhere, has never met anyone, has never had a conversation that you'd want to be a part of, has never had any fun at all. They've just followed the rules and done everything that they could to live as long as possible. And they're pushing their trolley with their steamed broccoli they're going to make later. I mean, I'd rather be Ozzy Osbourne.
Yeah, simple life. All he does is he breathes and screams the word Sharon all day.
Yeah, and when he was on stage as a rock star, he was the wildest rock star of all. Took all the drugs, probably slept with all the women. I mean, this guy had a fun life. So who'd you rather be? I think the
Yeah,
answer
he's
is
had
obvious.
a wild, wild life.
Yeah. Lindy says, you know what? Actually, the Rangers shouldn't have even been shining a light on the elephants on a night drive. Should only be shining a light on nocturnal animals. And even those you're not meant to shine a light on, not directly into their eyes because it blinds them. They're used
True.
to the nighttime. I love that clip of the elephant having sexy fun time with an Uno in the Kruger a few years back, although the people on the inside look quite traumatized from the Oh my God. Hey, today's the longest day. It's
No
the summer
way.
solstice. Yep, today's summer solstice.
So, what? The sun sets late.
Yeah, what's the longest day? So the sun comes up earliest. So you'll notice you probably didn't this morning, but if you were up really, really early, I'll tell you what time the sunrise was today because I've got this useful app that does this stuff for me. And tonight it'll go down at the latest. So let me tell you
Man,
what's
that's cool.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Your Cape Town's going to go pumping today. They love the beach and now they can stay on it longer.
Sunrise this morning was at 13 minutes past 5. Sunset tonight will be at 7 o'clock. And that's in Johannesburg. So can you imagine in Cape Town?
Yes, Cape Town's going to be like 9, 10 p.m.
By the way, you could do this interesting thing. I discovered this 2 or 3 years ago. I went out to my braai, which has got a chimney, obviously. And you could probably do this with any fireplace in your house, and you will find that the sun at midday today should be directly above you, so it'll shine directly down those chimneys. You will actually have light in your fireplaces or your braai today if you at midday. So go and have a look.
Man,
Yeah,
that's
it's
cool.
pretty wild because the sun is directly at its what they call the zenith today, and it'll be precisely above us. So in other words, that light will come shining right down those chimneys, which is just a cool thing to see. So if you are around a fireplace, then that's something to look at lunchtime. Keith Richards, poster boy for sex, drugs, rock and roll. Dud says, balance. Be healthy, but live a little too. Your brain being healthy and active through happiness will get you far in life. Well, they've done a bunch of research, and I hate when people say that, so I'm saying it now, but I know it sounds silly when people give a bunch of research. I'm not going to cite the studies. You can look them up. But they've figured out that people who are happy and people who enjoy their lives do live longer than people who are unhappy and are not having fun and don't have any social interaction, stimulation. And, you're more likely to develop addictions if you don't spend time with friends and you don't enjoy yourself. You're more likely to become an extreme, whatever it is, version of yourself if you're isolated from other people. So yes, you're absolutely right. Dads, it's all about balance. Being happy and having good influences in your life and spending time letting loose is an important part of living. It's not like the pressure release. It's not a valve that releases the pressure on your working life and all the serious things that you have to do and all the discipline stuff that you take part in. It's actually the most important part of life, because if you're not having any of that, you're just a pressure cooker and you're not going to live long. The stress will kill you. And you establish these rules in your head about how you're meant to eat this and do that. It's just going to make you unhappy. Anyway, Flax, anything from you before we go? Because we've got to wrap this up. We've got a really interesting interview coming up next.
I'm just so excited. I feel like it's the end of school this time of the year, and holidays are around the corner, and everyone must just have a safe holiday. Don't go to the beaches with the poop, and be safe on the roads. No drinking and driving.
Please don't do that. Yeah, I mean, we sound like parents, but it's just so unnecessary. And there are ways now. It's not like you have to, take a chance. Just don't do it. Be safe. All right, Flaxy, thanks very much, man. Good to see you.
Thanks so much. Have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.
Thanks, have a good one.
Cheers. I hope 2023 is going to be amazing. All right, coming up in just a moment or two, we will have probably one of my favorite interviews of the year. Prepare yourself. It's over an hour long, but it is a fascinating conversation I think you're going to love. Stick around. We're going to come back to that in a second. Oh, hang on. Pressed the wrong button there. There we go.
Welcome to the Third Draft Podcast, the show where we interview... Wait, do I start with who we are?
Catch the show.
We chat all about
Content creation.
the
business of content.
the business of content. Yeah, I
and
think
how
we can
much
take
money.
this one.
And how much... Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
and then I'll be like, how much money or something. You
yes,
know,
yes,
you have
yes.
to
go.
keep it a bit
yes,
fine.
yes, yes. I'm Cynthia,
And I'm Mash.
and we are the hosts of the Third Draft Podcast. So catch fresh episodes every Wednesday on cliffcentral.com
On YouTube.
and on podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. I like that! I like that! No, you do that. I like that. No, do it. Not say it.
Yes, indeed. Simpiwe on holiday already, but she will be joining us on Friday for a live special where we'll be wrapping up the year. Friday morning show. Tomorrow, of course, Pumi Mashiko joins me for the Burning Platform Best Of, but she'll also be live on the show with us for the first hour and a quarter tomorrow. So still some good shit on the way. But before we get to any of that, it is time for probably one of my favorite people in the world. He just manages to see things so clearly. He's erudite and he's able to explain things in a way that only a real professor of philosophy can. He held that position as professor of philosophy at the University of Portland, Oregon for a very long time. He has been in academia for much of his life. He's also become, I think, probably quite controversial in the last 5 to 10 years by standing up to his erstwhile colleagues in academia. And he's made quite a name for himself with a number of his publications, his books, his articles, and his fake articles in journals, which kind of shine a light on just how crooked the academy has become in America and how politicized everything is over there. His name is Peter Boghossian. He's been a guest on both this show a couple of times, and I'm pleased to say also on my TV show, which we did last year. And he is the kind of guy who is worth talking to, even when there isn't anything in the news that relates particularly to what he does. He's fascinating to speak to. He reckons that the world is changing at a rate that we just cannot comprehend at the moment, and sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. I encourage you to listen to all of this. It's a really interesting conversation. One of my favorite discussions of the last year. So we're really ending with a high this year with Peter Boghossian. It's about an hour and 15. So I hope you'll enjoy it. Take a listen, spread it around, send it to your friends. Make sure you like and subscribe and all of that stuff, please. It's what we need to make the show work in terms of the algorithms and the numbers. So do what you can. I know most people are listening on podcasts, but if you are part of the live show, then please do all of that stuff because it keeps us in business. And we want to start January with a big and explosive start. So we need your help. And the best way you can help is by commenting, liking, subscribing, and rating the show if you're listening on any of the podcast servers. Here it is. Peter Boghossian, probably one of my favorite interviews of the year, and something which I think you'll find interesting. He's we recorded this, I think, on Tuesday last week. So it's fresh, hot off the press, just for you. Peter Boghossian is a friend of the show, and I think someone who's well known enough to our audience at this point, somebody who has an amazing point of view on so many different things that it's never, ever boring to sit and talk to him for as many minutes as I can get him. I like to time down to talk to us in different time zones, but that doesn't seem to be a problem. He's a philosopher, an author, a father, and so much more. Peter Boghossian, it's such a pleasure to welcome you back to my show.
It is.
I love talking to you.
The pleasure is entirely my own. When we've had conversations, I've been at my father died, my mother died, and I've been very sick. I've suffered from Crohn's disease, so I've been at some interesting points in my life, and I've cherished our conversation. So I'm looking forward to this one.
Well, I have to say, despite all of those things which life has thrown at you, you've remained someone who I find very inspiring to talk to. And I think this time round, maybe more than any of the other times that we've spoken in the midst of the most woke of times, I think we've got some glimmers of hope going on at the moment. And I've seen how active you've become again on Twitter. I haven't yet. I'm still waiting to see what the landscape delivers. But right up front, I mean, you released a bunch of videos recently explaining some words, which I thought was really helpful. Even today, a bunch of people on social media were asking what woke even means.
Right.
And it's so great that we've got this library of videos where you actually explain some of these things to us in the language of both the left and people who've never ever spoken that kind of language.
Yeah, translations from wokish. So just a little background, like English wokish, a little background.
Right.
So after I resigned my position at Portland State University, and I had a job for life, I had continuous employment. So it wasn't exactly a gilded cage, but the place had become a kind of insane asylum where people were utterly beholden to an ideology for not only for which there was no evidence, but for which core tenets of the ideology actually conflicted with evidence. And something just came out again about trigger warnings. There's basically not only there's no evidence, but could actually injure people or make them more psychologically fragile. So anyway, so I started a nonprofit, and the whole goal of this, the North Star, is to move the needle and to move the needle on the current. So let's even take a step back from that. So our society, when I say our society, I don't just mean the United States or even the Anglosphere, the English-speaking world. Society is currently beholden by simultaneous multiple mass delusions. And this is no, I've been screaming about this since 2012. This is no small feat to solve. I just came across something the other day, and then I'm going to get into what you talked about directly. It was the number of times, I saw this on Twitter, the number of times the N-word has been used pre and post Musk. There's no evidence for this whatsoever. Zero evidence. It's just a meme someone's created. And the people who want to believe that there's more racism and misogyny, etc., are just pumping out this meme because it accords with what they already believe. But there's simply no evidence for this. But that's, to me, it's a very interesting way about how our mind works. We seek confirmatory pieces of evidence. We want to confirm what we believe, and then we want to push it out there so other people believe like we believe. So anyway, to the word. So we started making videos. I think that YouTube is a new Gutenberg press. It's a new way to reach people. It's an unbelievable vehicle to reach people. So we made videos to translate wokish words. We made videos about colleges of education. I'm talking a lot, but I'll just be quick. One of the reasons that this ideology has been so pervasive and has been able to capture so many institutions is, and it's going to sound so simple, but it's just true. It's that they've done this through manipulating the meanings of ordinary words. And when you understand that, you understand diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, all of these words.
These words do not belong to the definitions that we thought they belonged to, the dictionary definitions. And it's funny you should even mention that, because just today I saw that one of the dictionaries has redefined the term woman.
Cambridge. Correct.
Cambridge. And of course, all they're doing is creating this endless, repetitive, and circular argument of, a woman is anybody who identifies as a female, but they don't then define female. So female will be anyone who identifies as a woman. And so you have this infinite regression. It just doesn't seem to be a very honest way of anybody doing business. The whole purpose of language, and I think you'll agree with me here, is so that we can have more clarity with each other, so that we can understand each other better. It seems that the determination of the woke people is to make language as cloudy and obfuscatory as possible, to make it impossible for us to communicate honestly and clearly with each other, and in so doing to implement some sort of, I don't know what their end goal is, but it seems to me to be wholly destructive. It's not. There is no end game from their point of view that results in good things for most people.
Right.
Or am I?
No, you're right. It's to dismantle and disrupt, and we'll talk about that. But this language thing is utterly fascinating to me. So it went from changing the meanings of ordinary words, safety, race, woman. Now, enough woke people, they've been indoctrinated by the ideology and in university systems for long enough that they're literally position themselves to change the meanings of words in dictionaries. That is an astonishing. Okay, so when you change the meanings of words in dictionaries, what are you actually doing? Well, one of the things you're actually doing is that's how we adjudicate what a word means. We go to a dictionary if we have a dispute. There are implications for saying that someone who self-identifies as and lives as a woman is an actual woman and gets treated with, and I just want to, as in every single one of these conversations, I have to say what I'm confident that you believe, and I don't want to, if push back on me if I'm incorrect. Trans people should be entitled to live their life freely and without bigotry or hatred or discrimination of any kind, and they should be able to have their gender identity expressed in any way. They sleep with whoever they want. It's irrelevant to me. As
should any people in the world. I don't think
100%.
You and I certainly have an argument. There may be people out there who are opposed to those very basic humanitarian and secular concepts, but we're not here to talk to them, and I don't think that they're particularly interested in hearing from us anyway.
100%. I think that every conversation has to lead with that. So, but you're talking about something else. You're talking about when someone has an M or an F on their driver's license, for example, and they get pulled over for drunk driving. There are certain things that are entailed by that. What jail they go to? Are they housed with men or are they housed with women? There are certain. So these are not academic problems when we're talking about language. this has a very real consequence. Women in sports, men in sports, trans men in sports, women in people who were born biologically male in rape shelters. These have very, very real consequences for the world. Someone just told me the other day that he does a lot of work with the police. They don't want to use the word, people in the community don't want to use the word gang anymore. Instead, they want to use the word group. So think about this for a second. This is so crazy. So part of the problem with that is, well, the first thing is the reason for that is they think that that's racial. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear gang, I don't associate it with black or Asian or Jew. For me personally, there's not. And if there was, I'd say something. But
I mean, wasn't there just a very popular TV series, I forget the name of it, with a whole bunch of British gangsters from the 1920s in it, who were all white as far as I could tell, unless they decided to wokeify that and throw in one or two black people. But I don't associate those gangs. Remember the movie The Gangs of New York? Also not about black people at all.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So okay, so let's just run with that for a second.
Now gang is racist, supposedly.
Yeah, gang is a racist word, so they want to use the word group. The problem with using the word group is that groups, they're just different words. Not all almost no groups of people are gangs. And so
they are non-overlapping magisteria in some cases.
Yes, that's correct.
Can I? Because it's so hard for me to hold back and not kind of go in every direction with you. There's so much
I know. I feel the same way. Yeah.
So as a professor of philosophy, before you quit your job there, and I think it was a major thing when you did. Barry Weiss wrote about it. It was a big story across the United States. You really stood for principle there. And as a professor of philosophy, a person who'd really dedicated their life to not only studying all of that, but teaching it, was there ever a period in philosophical history, going all the way back to Solon and Socrates and Aristotle, has there ever been a point where people sought to undermine language in the way that we've discussed today?
Yeah, there was. That's the early postmodernists. The French postmodernists did. Derrida in particular, actually, Lyotard, the early French postmodernists. Helen Pluckrose had a great piece in Aereo, how French intellectuals destroyed the West. But what we're seeing now is the legacy of that tradition from the French in the 70s and the 80s and a little bit to the 90s, but in the 60s to a very small extent. But what we're seeing now is the legacy of that. And so it's been, Helen Pluckrose calls it applied postmodernism. So the original postmodernists had these ideas about reality and what you can know and subjectivity. And then that weaseled its way into the university when people started studying this. That's the other thing that I've come to think about recently, how the universities have not just, the gatekeepers of knowledge have not just fallen, they've betrayed some fundamental principles about what it means to uphold truth and reason and to think honestly about a problem. But yeah, so that's the answer. All of the stuff that we're seeing now comes from the French intellectuals.
So why would those things that you just listed matter? Why would things like truth and honest definitions for words? Because maybe there are people, I'm trying to be charitable in my
sure.
in my attempt to understand why great swathes of supposedly the smartest people in the most important colleges in the Western world would subject themselves to this sort of corruption and be completely comfortable with it. I'm going to be charitable and say, is it important? Are we not attaching ourselves to concepts that have just lived past their time? And maybe it is time for us to open ourselves up to the idea that there is no such thing as objective truth, that it is all about my or your or anyone else's truth. And how would that, in your opinion, either aid or undermine society?
Okay, so that's a huge question. So the first thing, why is truth important? Truth is important because if you want to lead a better life, not only do you have to be honest about the nature of the problem, but You also, if you want to construct situations outside yourself that bring about your flourishing, you have to base what you believe on what's true. One false belief, somebody, I was obviously religious examples come to mind, but I'm trying not to use those. Trying not to use those right now. One false belief at the pillars of your belief system causes you to create and change situations in your external reality that make you think that you're bringing yourself and your community closer to flourishing, but you're actually not, because you have a false belief. And again, I was thinking about a religious proposition, like not eating pork, or the testimony of a woman should be half that of a man, or
Right.
what have you. Okay. But your other question is extremely interesting. So, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this and immersed in this. Here's the problem. And I wrote about this. I published a piece on this in the Philosopher's Magazine called Deluded Departments, which my colleagues were utterly incensed about.
Oh, yeah.
So here's the problem. The problem is, and this again gets back to our conversation about words and what words mean. Smarter people are better at rationalizing. This is Michael Shermer's instinct. Michael Shermer wrote about this in The Believing Brain. He's a skeptic. He's written a number of books. He's a wonderful thinker. The smarter you are, the better you are at coming up with conclusions to bad ideas. So that's why smart people believe weird things. If you get groups of smart people together, they become even better at rationalizing bad ideas. In other words, with coming up with good reasons for bad ideas. When you look in what's happening now is in academia in particular, you cannot, 7 articles in 7 years get you tenure. Provided you have a few basic other things, like you actually show up for class, etc. But the big thing is publishing. So 7 articles in 7 years, you're much less likely to get a piece published if it runs against the dominant moral orthodoxy. So for example, if you say, I don't think trans women are women, and you kind of construct an argument, and this has happened over and over. The famous example is Rebecca Tuvel, who said if somebody who published a piece and attempted to publish a piece in Hypatia, who said if people can identify as a different gender, why can't they identify as a different race?
Race.
Yeah. Okay. So the issue is then, and stop me if at any point this becomes unclear, because it's complicated. So 7 papers in 7 years gets you tenure, gets you a job for life, but you can't publish almost anything unless you write something that upholds the dominant moral orthodoxy. You write something that's morally fashionable. And when you write something that's morally fashionable, other people build upon that literature. So we've created entire veins of scholastic thought in which it's all a house of cards. People think that these things are true. They teach it to the students feed it back to the instructor. They're marked wrong if they don't give the right answer to the question. And so this is like an ideology mill. It's like a machination. It's a machine of ideology reproduction. And that's what's happening in our institutions and our universities right now.
Well, I mean, this is something that you and I have spoken about before, I think on both my TV show and here, where we talked about the incredible work that you and 2 of your colleagues, you mentioned Helen Pluckrose already, and
Right.
James Lindsay being the other one, the 3 of you handed all these bullshit papers in to various universities and had them immediately regaled and observed as being extraordinarily breakthrough and all the rest of it, only to ultimately reveal to these universities that you were making this stuff up because you could see how to work the system and that the system is broken.
System is irrevocably broken. Correct.
Now, if these are the people who have been teaching those who are now going to enter the workforce, who are already in the workforce, the people who are going to enter government, make decisions for where society is headed, and they've got these poisonous concepts and this complete lack of regard for things like truth,
correct,
then we start seeing the breakdown that I was talking about earlier. And this, the reason that you were uncomfortable, perhaps, I don't want to put words in your mouth, about bringing up religious counter arguments, is that very often religion is disregarded as a philosophy that has also lived past its time, that a lot of religion carries with it all kinds of dogma and, unscientific, irrational, unreasonable stuff that post the Enlightenment people don't look very favorably upon. But some of that stuff, Milton, Francis of Assisi, some of that stuff is probably the best antidote to this woke stuff, even if it's religious. And I say that as an atheist, as someone who doesn't believe.
Yeah.
Do you think that, because I mean, if I've had any realization in the last while, it's that the people who are religious, be they, Jews, Muslims, Christians, whoever they may be, at very least have some sort of value backbone, which can be relied upon to drive them in the direction of truth, as opposed to those people who do not have any such system of belief and will merely go whichever way the woke wind blows. And it worries me tremendously on that front. But I think maybe the religious people are now more my allies than my enemies.
Yeah, it's a funny. I published a piece about that called Culture War 2.0. It's a funny situation in which we find ourselves. I agree with everything you said except for one word that you used. You used the word truth, and I don't think it's a matter of truth. I think it's a matter of social cohesion. So if you have an old, quote unquote, old religion, a traditional religion, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, there are edicts for how to have society cohere and how to, whether or not you believe in whether in the truth of those is irrelevant, they work. Right. And so there's something about that. I think that this is called the substitution hypothesis. And then I'll share one of the things I've been thinking about this. Is the default state just belief? We want to believe something. We want to believe anything. So let's just make sure that people believe more benign things. When they bring people off of the battlefields, particularly ISIS folks, one of the things they do to deconvert them is they don't teach them that Islam is bullshit, or that they shouldn't believe this nonsense. Nobody flew to heaven on a winged horse or whatever. No, they bring in more benign interpretations of Islam to try to convince people that the more fundamentalist is a word imported from the Protestants, but these more canonical interpretations, particularly of the latter part of Islamic scripture, where all the nasty stuff is. So I think it's really important. And I've said a lot, but I'm going to stop. Is that clear so far?
Yeah. Look, I think people who care are following. I think if you've decided that this is all too complex, then perhaps you're just not as interested as Peter and I are, and that's fine. Then don't listen. We're not catering to everybody here. We're trying to explain and discuss things that I think are really worthy of discussion and may require that we lose some of the audience along the way. It's like going into battle. So don't worry about it. Okay.
So I think that there's a profound difference between saying that, the subjective turn that we're seeing now, it is my lived experience, or I feel this way, or so when you do that, and traditional religious people, and ironically, the more quote unquote fundamentalists, the more a literal interpretation of scripture that one has, the less one is likely to do that. The less one turns to lived experience. Now, it is certainly true that Christians used the testimony of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah, and you often hear a lot of Christians saying that they have a personal relationship with God, and that's why they're Christians, which is much more like the whole lived experience argument.
Correct. And that's why I've predicted for almost a decade now that future versions of proselytization won't turn to those subjective experiences. So one of the problems with the subjectivity, and again, remember, almost all of the woke stuff has a kernel of truth in it, almost all of it. So, and then they take that kernel of truth and they go to crazy land, or they go to madness and they try to institutionalize that madness.
Well, it's like a flat earth tell you, well, there's this, and you'll go, wow, that's actually a good point. And before you know it, you're starting to listen to the flat earther as if they're saying good.
Right. Yeah. So we have a problem here in which our institutions have been captured by people. Oh, the lights just go on.
That's my lights. Yeah, thank God.
Okay. So
You hear me say that? Thank God. Not ironic.
Right. Okay. So we have a problem when our institutions have been captured. It really in the only features of, for example, American life that haven't been captured by this diversity, equity, inclusion madness of professional sports teams. They have no diversity requirements. So one of the things that happens is that people start to lose trust in their institutions. They start to lose trust in the journals and academic scholarship. They start to lose trust in almost everything you could think of. I think it was American Airlines wants to have diversity requirements. Okay, so I used to believe that
for the passengers or just for the staff?
The unfortunately for the pilots, right?
Oh,
so
right.
so
Okay.
so I used to think that the only reason somebody would want diversity in something like diversity in philosophy department is because they thought it wasn't important. And then, and I said, well, no one would want that for brain surgery or in medicine or in for their pilots. But it turned out that that ideological creep was so pervasive that now it's in medicine. Now it's in fire department hiring. Now it's in like every conceivable facet of life.
This is so interesting, and we're building up to the point where, and I'm glad you were the one to bring up religion, but we're building up to this idea that this is actually a substitute religion. But before we get there, South Africa already has a quota system in our sport. Some sports more than others, but
in sports,
yeah. So we're already there, and if you want to see what failure looks like, just hang on a little bit, because it's been used as an excuse. Oh, well, we come out of this history of racial discrimination and apartheid and everything else, and people here are obviously quite sensitive to those things. The government that's been in power for the last 28 years has made it a priority of theirs to make these what looked like cosmetic changes. So there would be street name changes, and kind of. I mentioned to you, I think before, that there was a movement called Roads Must Fall at the very beginning of all of this, which started in South Africa, not surprisingly. And I don't want us to take all the blame, but I think we can take some of the credit, in inverted commas, for the genesis of this whole thing, because that movement sought to almost try to rewrite history like they want to rewrite dictionaries, for example, and to redesign sports teams on an almost cosmetic basis. Whether or not they would win or not, that wasn't the most important thing. Now, I mean, I don't know of any group of people who would want to watch a sports game where the team they support does not win because they have not chosen the best people, or because they've, in principle, gone ahead, and this is that ideological creep that you're talking about, and selected people from a specific race or a specific gender or a specific sexuality or ideology or whatever, but they've couched this under the term of inclusion.
Well, if they really believe that, why don't they put midgets on basketball teams?
Maybe we're heading that way. One day someone will say, well, why not? It's not completely beyond the bounds of sanity for us to imagine.
That's the problem, is that there's no ridiculous restriction anymore, right?
By the way, you and I have both been canceled for having the word midget in this discussion, because
that's right. At this point, I'm like, I'm beyond any kind of remote cancellation.
I've stopped caring as well. Bring it on, is what I say.
Right, right. But
I want to get to your latest book, and I want to talk about where your head's at right now. So forgive me if I'm cutting you short. I really don't like to do that, because this kind of conversation is one that needs space to to start meaning something. You were one of the first people, you and probably Douglas Murray, who started recognizing that this whole woke movement, whatever you want to call it, this
mass delusion.
I mean, Gad Saad, who we've also had on the show before, identifies it as a kind of mind virus.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine.
That's probably one of the better definitions too. Although I've got to give you and Douglas Murray credit for this, because you started to notice that there were rituals associated with this, that there was a faithful in the center of this. It mimics some of the most brutal proto-religions that we that we can see if we study a little bit of history. And I'm not talking that you don't have to be someone who's, written 2,000-page books on the history of religion to pick up on these things. Where did it all start to click for you that this was not just a philosophy, that it was mushrooming into a religion?
Yeah, so I published a paper with James Lindsay, with Jim is also a good friend of mine, in 2014 called "Privilege is the Original Sin," and the thesis was exactly what you'd think it was, that privilege operates in the same way as original sin does. And it was published in a piece at a venue that's no longer operating. It's called All Think. So privilege offers and operates analogously to original sin. You can't wipe it away. It's a stain. Unlike original sin, you can kind of wash it away through the blood of Christ, or whatever particular religious flavor one happens to believe, accepting Jesus in one's heart or what have you. So some of the things for me were very small things. For example, I would ask people, and I live in the epicenter of this. So I live in Portland, and I was teaching at Portland State University, which had become just an unbelievable cesspool, like an ideology factory that is just unthinkable. And so I would ask people, what is your evidence for this? But I really watched my tone. But I was genuinely curious around 2012. Why are we making this a policy? Why are we I honestly don't understand this. And instead of saying, well, here's the evidence, people became upset with me. And then people became really upset with me. So then I started looking for the evidence myself. So then I started reading the source material. I started reading the literature. I started looking, and that's when I understood it was just a massive revelation to me. All of this stuff has been idea laundered. It's idea laundered. In other words, it's been people have a moral feeling. They find other people who are in academia who have this moral feeling. They write a paper about it, they publish it, and out from the other end comes knowledge. And then they're claiming that this stuff is knowledge. So, but it's not knowledge. It's just the musings of ideologues, right? That's all. That's simply all it is. So I think I had whether or not you want to think this is good or bad, but I think that living in Portland and being at my former university, where people were complete believers. But that's the other thing. You don't really know who's a complete believer, because when you create a culture of fear, nobody's willing to speak up against the orthodoxy and say the emperor has no clothes. So you're not really sure who believes this stuff, but it's certainly, from their verbal behavior, it certainly appeared as if they were true believers.
Do you have any idea, while we're on this subject, because there's so many others we have to cross to, but do you have any idea why this is particularly attractive as a philosophy stroke religion to college-educated white women? Because they seem to be the leading edge, which is so interesting, because actually this is probably one of the least threatened, the least oppressed, the most protected groups in certainly the Western world. I mean, women don't work on oil rigs and go to the army and fight on the front lines. And despite all the talk about the glass ceiling and how women in the workplace have a hard time, and yes, there are obviously terrible men who do terrible things to women all the time, but by and large, the white Western college educated woman has the best kind of living available to any human being in all of recorded history. And that group is the most intent on shitting all over Western civilization. Why do you think that is? Is it guilt?
I don't know. I was just talking to James Lindsay about that the other day. I personally don't know. That's a piece of the puzzle I haven't figured out, but so I don't know the answer to that.
Wow. Okay. Well, there's an honest answer if ever there was. I'm still trying to figure it out too. I think it may have something to do with guilt. I think it may have something to do with, this maybe it's this passive aggressive stuff that has always plagued human society. I don't know, but I mean, the fact that you also don't know makes me feel a bit better about not having figured it out. So, talking about your latest book, I mean, let's get straight into this, because you are a prolific writer. You mentioned it already in this discussion, a couple of these articles, some of which have been received with huge opprobrium, some of which have cost you friends, some of
Definitely true.
cost you jobs, some of which have cost you relationships, all kinds of things here. I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine today, and I said, is it worth it? Because every time someone like you puts pen to paper or does an interview with me, or, I pick up a microphone and say something which I think is fairly innocuous and it gets me into huge trouble.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that goes, well, you could just choose to live a happy life. You don't have to fight all these battles.
True.
Do you often feel like, why am I doing this? Because I could still have that cushy job where I'd be guaranteed, an income. My kids wouldn't have to worry. The house would be paid for. I could have a nice life. Why am I fighting battles that it seems sometimes the rest of academia anyway are dead against, and I'll be fighting them until I'm dead? You think it's worth it?
I mean, I can tell you with unshakable certainty that it is absolutely worth it. I think it's a part of it is a kind of temperament. I just have zero toleration for bullshit, like zero. But the other part is it comes down to personal integrity. I cannot give lip service to a deranged ideology. I just am incapable of it. And I cannot stand by while there's witch hunts and seeing the things that I truly do cherish. What Enlightenment values, Western civilization. I just cannot stand by while a bunch of deranged maniacs try to rip the whole thing down and offer nothing in its place. Nothing. So for me, it was a question of keeping my integrity, of maintaining my integrity. And I guess I'm kind of an intellectual pugilist, like I wanted to fight back. I wanted to use this. So listen, this is one of the things I have to say if someone's listening to this. And this took me a very, very long time to figure out. And it's also a hard pill to swallow. There are some people who have absolutely nothing to contribute to a conversation. Nothing. Zero. In fact, listening to them is actually a bad thing. So if I don't know how to fly a plane, or if you don't know how to fly a plane, right? Why would you listen to somebody giving you, if you wouldn't listen to their advice, you wouldn't listen to their criticism. So that's I think everybody kind of harbors this notion, maybe I'm wrong. And that's a good notion that's a good notion to have, because you always want to correct your beliefs and figure out what's true. But there are some people who have nothing of substance and meaningful to contribute to anything. So once you understand that, you can just completely ignore anything they have to say, because analogously, again, they don't know how to fly a plane. So why should you listen to them?
Yeah. I mean, often though, philosophy, your subject, is given a bit of a free pass on that front, because
Totally.
We assume that all philosophies are equal, or at least they deserve an airing. They're not. I mean,
no, the Taliban should not be on the Women's Rights Council. The Iranians were trying to take, they should not be. There are some people.
I remember Christopher Hitchens once said, and it got him into huge trouble back then, before there was cancel culture or any of this stuff. And I remember thinking, well, that's a fairly profound thing to say. He used to say that the terminus of banal multiculturalism is a point where nothing has any value, and we may as well not invest any time or effort in things like civilization.
Right.
And that's a very profound thing to say. And what it essentially means is that all cultures are not equal, and that some cultures have proven to withstand the rigors of time and of many different political, social, economic movements, and that those should be regarded with some, even if it's not respect, at least some intellectual humility.
Yeah.
From the point of view of modern philosophers.
100%. Yeah. So that's part of the problem. You cannot be both a relativist and a multiculturalist. I mean, and an egalitarian. You cannot say that all cultures are relative and that all cultures are equal. Because in order to say all cultures are equal, there has to be a standard by which you hold them to. So part of that, you said your audience can take it. So I'll give you some kind of deep.
Go.
Okay. So if you can't be both egalitarian and relativist, one of the advantages that people who participate in this ideology have, the woke ideology, is they don't have to do what you and I have to do, and what people for thousands of years. You've asked me if there's ever been an historical break from this before. Like, they don't have to abide by the rule of non-contradiction. They don't have to. All they can do is, what they do is they just resort to their personal experience, their lived experience. So they don't have to do the intellectual work to figure out an argument to rebut it, because they believe that arguments themselves, embedded within the argument, is a way for privilege to preserve itself. So they
have a very powerful weapon on their side, in that they can adopt this point of view and never have to do any heavy lifting. So it is ultimately a kind of intellectual laziness and bankruptcy as well.
Yeah. It's even worse than that, because if you are lazy, that's fine. It's a way for the ideology to prevent itself from being dislodged, because it can instantly, anytime a challenge comes in. So it's kind of like, again, back to the religion thing. It's kind of like, oh, the devil made me. It's from the devil. Don't listen to it. Doubt your doubts. It's a famous quote from the head of the Mormon Church. So the idea that we can exempt ourselves from the tools that we use to figure out problems, because those tools themselves, from Aubrey Lord, the master's tools cannot disable the master's house. Those tools themselves are responsible for racism and patriarchy and oppression. So we can't use those. We have to use something else. Like, we have to listen to the lived experience of people who have been historically oppressed. Right. So they have not only a different worldview and framework, but even people who have a different worldview. I'm thinking in this country, like the far right and the far left, even these people, unless you go super far, they agree on, for example, that you can look at data to figure out whether or not trickle-down economics is good for poor people, but we're now dealing with a different problem of a class of people who exempt themselves from the tools of reasoning and discerning judgment, and, to use a big word,
even language. I mean, historical oppression. Let's just take those two words.
Mm-hmm.
There is not even agreement between people inside of wokeism about what is actually historical, because many of them will say, well, history is actually a completely subjective thing, and history is only written by the victors, so we don't know the true history, plus history is written by men or whatever else, so therefore we can just completely disregard it.
Right.
And oppression to them only works in one direction, right? I mean, this is where, famously, people like Don Lemon have found themselves speechless when somebody who is well versed in history, like, particularly the history of slavery, for example, and then they tell him what actually happened during the North Atlantic slave trade, and how that came to an end, and who it was who put it to an end, and how it was all done, and who still continues to trade in slaves today. And then someone like Don Lemon, who's definitely a product of the left, finds himself in a situation where he suddenly has to accept publicly on his live TV show.
I heard that interview, yeah.
And he may have it wrong. I'm seeing more and more of this now, and I wanted to fast forward quickly to what's happening on Twitter at the moment, because just yesterday,
it's amazing,
again,
isn't it?
Elon Musk, who's having, I think he's having the most fun he's ever
I
had
love
in
the
his life.
man. I think he's fantastic.
Well, at least then South Africa can make up for what we started with Roads Must Fall, by hopefully having, one of our own sons try to purify things a little bit, or at least bring things out into the light. I wouldn't consider him any kind of messianic character, but to put $44 billion of your own money into something which you don't immediately see a profit mechanism for is one of the most altruistic things. It makes Bill Gates and Warren Buffett look like small fry in the world of philanthropy. But we digress. This guy is arguing things like pronouns, and I mean, he's going right into the heart and soul of this beast. He's saying, prosecute Fauci, for example, as his pronoun. This is, and obviously the part of that really offended people was the pronoun part, not the Fauci. I want to know what you think of what's going on here, and whether you think this is going to be a first real strike from the other side. While people like you have been laboring hard in the background, this is at a level that you and I could we couldn't affect the
Correct.
discourse at, even if we tried our hardest. We've been doing that already. But this guy has just picked up the biggest sword of all, their favorite plaything, the left's favorite plaything, and he has now completely removed their authority over it, which is driving them crazy.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, this is so interesting. And if you're not on Twitter, you should totally jump on Twitter because it's a whole world. I found that Twitter has become fun again. So one of the things that you see, and it's interesting, I think in the last month, my follower count, I don't know, I don't really keep too close of a track to it, although I have since Elon Musk took over. So it's gone up like 5,000. I think you're at like 2 million or something, isn't that?
I must be honest with you. I have not logged on. I'm going to go and check after this interview. I'm not going to try and get in now. I can't even remember my password, but it's possible. I think everybody kind of on the non-woke left side of things has probably seen a major boost in their following, not because of any artificial skullduggery, but because that was always going on and it was being hidden.
Correct. And they would go before Congress and they say, we're not shadow banning, we're not, deboosting. And they were that's the other thing. I'm trying to think of how to say this without saying these people, but I can't seem to. These people are pathological liars. Like they're the reward center in their brain. I'm telling you, this is an undiagnosed mental disorder. We don't have a name for it yet. These people are pathological liars. So to the extent that they would perjure themselves, think about that. Yep. Okay. So one of the things that you see happening on Twitter is, and this gets back to what I said before, many woke people are just getting off of Twitter. They're quitting Twitter. My speculation, my hypothesis is that the reason that they're getting off of Twitter is not because they think this is going to be some kind of a racist thing or anything. It's because their arguments cannot sustain criticism.
Well, it's the same reason they won't have a debate with you.
100%, yes.
Or with people like, let's just
Douglas
Murray, Ben Shapiro,
Andrew Doyle. Right.
They won't argue with these people because
they will argue with Ben. They will argue with Ben because Ben has, and I blurbed his last book. I love Ben. I think he's great. I'm going to be on a show in Florida. The Authoritarian Impulse was a great book, by the way. They'll argue with him because he has some chinks in his armor, not intellectual chinks in his armor, but there are people who are kind of specialists like myself in this woke stuff, and I'm not beholden to another set of values. So Ben is an Orthodox Jew. I'm a total atheist.
They will use that against him.
Correct.
But to get back to the discussion, so Elon is upsetting them more than anything you and I could have done.
Right. Now think about this. Here's the guy they should love electric cars, and the whole ESG thing I don't want to talk about, but now people saying, well, I won't buy Tesla and I won't. Okay. So listen, this is what happens.
So you never cared about the environment anyway, did you? That wasn't, the environment was just a cudgel to use against your
100%
intellectual and ideological enemies. You didn't care about that stuff, and we can now see through you.
Yeah. And why just think, I mean, it's so crazy. Think about the fact that people, to really understand this, the fact that people are upset that there's a platform that allows for free speech, open inquiry, dialogue, discourse. And yeah, there's going to be some nastiness that comes along with it. Absolutely. Nobody's denying that. But just think about the mindset. What belief would one have to hold to think that's a bad thing? The belief that you would have to hold is to think that there's something inherent in speech itself that's bad. And that's the belief they hold. And that is the undermining.
We crossed that bridge at the beginning of this discussion when we decided between us that it was fairly evident to anyone who was looking that they don't appreciate definition and words and meaning.
Correct.
So it's all a plaything to them. And therefore, why would they care about the value of free speech if speech itself is just another tool in the arsenal?
Correct. So as you've not pointed out directly, but we can infer, a reasonable person can infer from this conversation. And I think Elon Musk actually tweeted out something like, and I retweeted it, wokeism is just the problem. It's the problem that we have to get rid of. We should pull up the tweet, the quotation, and put it in there. And I think that that's correct. I think that there are other problems that are significant, but wokeism, very significant, but wokeism is preventing us from addressing those problems because it's removing the tools that we need to figure out what's true. And instead, it's substituting the feelings of people who have no expertise in the subject matter whatsoever. So it's making every problem that we face communally impossible. And when you take words like gang out and put in group, we can't even identify what the problem is. We can't say, well, there's a gang member, he's having a funeral. And, well, how do the police know if they should go to the funeral of a group member?
Yeah, exactly. We're actually making everything harder for everyone in society. How about this obsession? And it seems to me like there is a huge undersupply of racism, which we should be very grateful of in the world today. We should be grateful that we live at a time where it is extremely hard to find real world direct examples of people being overtly racist. That is a huge achievement of the modern West, and something which, despite all of the sins of slavery, which are not unique to the West, all of the sins of racism and racial discrimination, which you can argue were better or worse in the West, but happened all over the world.
Right.
Even within communities of color, to use the terminology that is so often used by people who argue this, that in some way we should take stock of how good things are. But it seems that this unquenchable thirst for racism, which is really the one that they're most hungry for, because, the trans thing it's kind of still somewhat new. I don't think you're going to find any self-respecting person who will attempt to defend slavery or racism in the modern world. If they do, they'll very quickly pay a very heavy price for that, which in itself solves the problem. But there is this unquenchable thirst to the point where you have people making up just total hoaxes.
Right. Yeah. Wilfred Riley has a book about that, hate crimes hoax. It's a wonderful book that's eye-opening. So many of these, racial hate, quote unquote, hate crimes, they're just hoaxes by people of that race or people of that particular sexual orientation. And there's overwhelming evidence from Steven Pinker and Michael Shermer and others that the moral arc is bending towards justice. The racism, for example, the hammer blows of modernity are just beating that down. So it's a wonderful so just a break from this. So when you make an excuse for yourself not to do intellectual work and figure stuff out, one of the things that you can exempt yourself from is understanding history. The moral arc is bending towards justice. And you mentioned Douglas Murray, a friend of mine. Douglas Murray has said, we have a Nazi problem. There are not enough Nazis, so we have to make them up. I put a tweet out a year ago. We should only use the word Nazi for National Socialist, and people went fucking crazy. I mean, it was insane. Now look at the consequence of this. Now in Ukraine, for example, Putin is saying the initial reason for the war was, well, there are a bunch of Nazis over there. We've got to denazify Ukraine. So it's just an example of what happens when you play fast and loose with language. You give people an excuse to do bad things. But you're right. The among other things. But you're right. This is one of the things that we see right now in the world.
So there's an insatiable thirst also for people to get offended, and 100%. I wonder, when someone writes the story of our generation, the generations that are alive now in 2022, I wonder what they'll say about our moral maturity, that we were so quick to anger for a civilized modern society. And there are some countries that have behaved themselves far better than the United States or than South Africa. So I'm not, here is for me no equivocation whatsoever. It appears fairly obvious that there are huge groups of people whose entire purpose from their waking moment until the going to sleep at night is to be
100%.
upset and outraged by things that either do not affect them at all or affect them so indirectly that it is more than the 6 steps of Kevin Bacon or whatever else you want to call it.
Yeah.
They would have a better time arguing in a language they had never spoken before in their life.
Yeah. Okay. So sometimes I feel you and I are the same person. I'm just an older version of you. I got back.
I'll take it.
I came back from 2 months in Eastern Europe. I lived in Hungary, and I did filming in Romania and Hungary, and I did this thing on my YouTube channel. It's Peter Boghossian, Dr. Peter Boghossian or something, where I set up lines of tape on a street. I don't know if you've seen this, but these are really interesting. They're called spectrum street epistemology. It's basically epistemology, taking what you know, and I'm answering your comment directly, taking what you know and asking people if they're justified in what they believe, and then having them move to a line. So strongly agree, slightly agree, neutral, and the other side. And so then you would ask people a series of questions, etc. And one of the things that I noticed from doing this, I don't even know how many times, we're going to release these videos in January, is that nobody and I was just literally standing on a street corner interviewing anybody who would come by, playing this thought experiment with this thought game. There was not a single person in all of Hungary or Romania, in the places where I was, who was looking for a reason to be offended. Nobody was outraged at anything anybody said. But if you watch my videos on college campuses, people are insane. They're seeking. They're so nasty. And that's the other thing. This ideology bundles itself up. Oh, we care about people. No. And just while I'm on the thought, one of the things that you notice about people who are deep in this ideology is they all have the same voice. They speak in a kind of saccharine way that's concealing a vicious nastiness. If you watch
like latent resentment, and it seems that's why they have to go up at the end of every sentence.
That's right.
They're trying to lift their own spirit to not sound quite as curmudgeonly as their spirit must actually be.
Yeah, it's like a cult.
And they're humorless. They are, and that to me is the part. I mean, you're an academic, you're a man of letters, you're this prolific author and this big thinker. I'm much more attracted to the idea of just having fun conversations where people can laugh and be themselves. You never have fun conversations with these guys. They don't have a sense of humor at all.
Yeah, that's why they were so pissed off about the grievance studies hoax, about the dog rape and all that stuff. That's why they were so enraged about that, because it was funny and it drove a heart through their ideology. But it was interesting when I was asking people these questions in Eastern Europe, and I'm going to do this in Puerto Rico and Australia in the coming months. But I was just really interested in how considered they were. It was just as if I had walked into a different world. And I want to say, I read and blurb Konstantin Kissin's book, A Love Letter to America, which is wonderful. And in that book, he talked about, he grew up in the Soviet Union. I've
listened to one or two of his podcasts. He's in
the trigonometry
UK.
Guy. Yeah, he's a super good guy. He's become a friend of mine.
Yeah.
It's just like actors. You're always wondering, like, how do these actors know all these other actors? It's because they're in the same, like, I'm in the same, this is what I do. That's how I know all these people. But, one of the things that the United States is exporting right now is, I was a massive believer up until very recently that we had to export American values, equality under the law, Miranda rights, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. But now the values that we're exporting, and I just wrote the foreword to Majiv Roholtra's book, Snakes in the Ganga. This book is truly unbelievable. It's an 864-page tome about how the United States exports wokeism as a neo-colonial export that colonizes Indianism,
right, And
Yeah.
this guy is a tremendous
Holy shit.
champion of Indian culture and tradition.
Dude,
He's one
this
of the people
guy is
who's
on
done
another
all the-
level.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I mean, he is on another level. Like, holy shit. I mean, like, I know, like, truly at this point, I can say I know some of the smartest people in the English speaking world. This guy he's so wise. That's the perfect word. But anyway, these are the values. Huh?
He's got a problem, and Constantine is saying that America used to be a place. I think I'm certainly not trying to short circuit this, but so I understand it. America used to be a place that exported good ideas that were humanitarian, that were based on, Enlightenment ideals, perhaps, that were for the good of all humanity, that sought to bring a measure of fairness to the world, and that now it's suddenly become about America exporting the extreme views of the far left by forcing, the embassy in a place where there are no gay rights whatsoever to fly the trans flag. I mean, it's just not going to fly, right?
Right. Well, he's claiming, like, his love letter was a love letter to America about 20 years ago, and I'm claiming every single thing you just said. It's really it's heartbreaking. It's just heartbreaking, and it's not the left values that we're exporting. It's woke values. That's what we've become, the world's predominant exporter of woke values. And the way we've done it in a number of ways, but one of the ways that we've done it is through language, which we've just talked about. I just published a piece on November 8th in Spiked explaining how woke, for woke to work, to have this kind of mimetic penetration into people's belief system and who speak different languages, it needs to be in English, because every woke word has a different meaning, has multiple meanings, or almost everyone. If I can think of one that doesn't, but they have multiple meanings. But the problem is that those words only translate into the primary meaning. So diversity, for example, we traffic in, or inclusion. Everybody should be included, different races, heights. I mean, of course, but inclusion actually means to restrict speech someplace so that people feel welcome. But the secondary definition doesn't translate into whatever language it is. So that's one of the things that they do. What you see no matter where you go is that, and even in India, there are videos of the head of the Supreme Court peppering his language with woke terminology. Wokeism has a way to work its way in when people, particularly young people, speak in their language but use woke words. So they'll be speaking, and then boom, there's a woke word. Boom, there's a woke word. And they do that because the secondary meaning doesn't translate, only the primary meaning translates. Was that clear?
I get you. Yeah, I get you. I think, you've just mentioned that street epistemology thing, which I think is so interesting, because you're getting this considered opinion from some people, and other people, you just have a reflexive opinion. And it's funny that, if you mention countries like Hungary, people will go, oh, well, that's just because you're a right winger. I mean, just so everyone is clear, your political credentials are far more on the left than on the right. You would describe yourself, I suppose, as a liberal, right?
Yeah, and just because I'm against bullshit, like just because I'm against wokeism, that doesn't mean that I'm on the right.
Correct, but unfortunately, from their point of view,
Correct.
That is the best way to undermine your argument, is to say, oh, but not just from the right, far right.
Or alt-right, far right. Correct.
This is what has driven people like you and I together across continents. It's opened up
100%
between you and people in the UK and in Sweden and in Australia and all across the United States. It's not as if we came together in order to, in some coerced, concerted way, put up a fight. It's like we were driven into places where there were only a few of us willing to have these conversations. So we met each other.
Correct. And that's, again, to echo what I said before, that's just simply why you can't listen to them, because you're not a Nazi. I know I'm not a Nazi. In fact, even if you extend the semantic range of Nazi to mean like very bad racist person who hates Jews, that's insane. So why there's just they have nothing. There's no point to listen to them. If they want to make a substantive intellectual critique, or I don't know, right? So that's the other thing that's really interesting, and how the rules of the game have changed. Before, if somebody wrote something that you didn't like in academia, well, what you would do is you would write a counter to that. And,
Right.
Doesn't have to be in the same venue, the same periodical, the same journal, but usually it is. But okay, you want to write another one, that's fine. But now we don't do that anymore. Someone writes a letter that, or pens a peer-reviewed article or journal or something that you don't like. Instead of countering those arguments, you smear them. You bring them up on charges, is what happened to my colleague at Portland State University, Bruce Gilley. He's the guy who wrote the famous paper, The Case for Colonialism. And so we're operating with people, again, who have a different rule set. And the rule set is weaponize offices of diversity, equity, inclusion. Go on social media and go crazy on social media. And that's the other thing with Elon Musk buying that, is they can no longer. The problem with people like Trump, et cetera, being kicked off of Twitter was not because of anything he said or what have you. It's that the rules were not applied equally.
Correct.
And we see that with Matt Taibbi, Barry Weiss, Michael Schellenberger. I'm sorry, go ahead.
People are constantly telling us that they're egalitarian. They seem to want the rules applied very, very differently to their ideological enemies. And they do see, make no mistake, they see us as their enemies.
Oh, not only enemies, existential threats. You and I are
our
right.
biggest fault. The reason that we have not been winning this argument in so many places is because we have not acknowledged that these people are our intellectual and ideological enemies. We've tried to treat them like reasonable friends instead of like ideological enemies, which is what they've always seen us as.
Yeah, they've seen us as existential threats. But the other reason that we're not losing is because we've brought the wrong tools. Excuse me. Thank you. The other reason we're not winning is because we've brought the wrong tools. It's like we bring a chessboard to a football game. We are attempting to use reason, argument, dialogue, discourse with people who don't believe in any of these things. So for them, it's all about power and power relations.
So where you have a real edge here, and this is one of my favorite things to do with someone who is a specialist in your, you've written this book, How to Have Impossible Conversations.
Correct.
Are there there are conversations that are so difficult to have with people like, your ideological enemies, the people who consider you an existential threat? There are some situations where it's just not, for example, if they throw, Nazi accusations at you, you can't really even muddy yourself by having a retort to that. There isn't something that you can say that would be reasonable by attempting to have the discussion with someone who has called you something like that. You almost give them too much credit than they're due.
No,
the right thing to do might be to walk away. Or how do you deal with that?
No, not at all. Those are actually easy conversations. Those are very easy. When I taught in the prisons, did my dissertation in the prisons, I was never worried about a prisoner saying "fuck you" to me, or you can have a conversation with anybody, provided one thing, and this is a secret. This is a big secret. As long as they say something back to you, you're good to go. I can give you the tools to navigate that conversation. Excuse me. The problem is when people don't respond to you. The problem is when people won't engage you. That's an impossible conversation. But as long as someone is willing to engage you, they can call you a Nazi. You can call you whatever you want. There's just a template that you follow that we've pulled from multiple domains of thought, various lines of literature. It's not magic. It's not these are not the drones you're looking for. It's not. There's nothing mystical or Jedi mind trick about it. It's just drawing from the literature to show, using the Socratic method as a base. But there's nothing magical. But you can totally have a conversation with a woke person. The problem is that woke people don't want to have conversations with you. That's the problem.
I'm very aware of how precious your time is, so I don't want to, strong arm you into staying here longer than
I'll
you
stay. It genuinely is always a pleasure to talk to you. Truly.
What's on your agenda in the next stage of this battle, because you don't sound to me like you're any kind of fading flower. And
No.
with the wind at our backs and Twitter being finally opened up to, and listen, we're prepared to lose arguments, right? I mean, you and I don't want to speak for you, but I don't think I have any problem with arguing with anybody and being proven wrong. I think it would be great for people to take me on in whatever I've said, and I've said lots of things. I'm sure you feel the same way. But with all of this happening now, where at least the playing field seems to be leveling out a little bit on Twitter anyway. We can't speak for the others.
Yeah.
What is your next move?
Well, just on what you said before, in the Gorgias, Plato says that it is better to be refuted than to refute. He says that's the greater gain of the two. Socrates says that. So I have no problem with being wrong. In fact, it's good because I don't want to be wrong one more second than I have to be, to borrow
Just
quotation.
Explain to me what you think it means that it is better to be refuted than to refute.
Oh, it just means if you engage someone in a conversation or even a debate, I'm not a fan of debates, but a conversation, and if you can refute them, in other words, you can show them that something that they believe to be true is actually not true, or they could do it to you. It's always better if they do it to you, because if they do it to you, then you can rid yourself of a false belief. I want to have as many true false beliefs as possible, but even more important than having true beliefs is to have as few false beliefs as possible. It is far more important to have fewer false beliefs than it is to have more true beliefs. Right? It's
You see why I needed clarity on that is because you've explained it better than anyone else could.
Oh,
I love that. So what is next?
Oh, okay. So I have such an ambitious year. I'm just hoping my Crohn's disease doesn't kick in, because I have a very ambitious year. So I'm going to go around the world, and I'm going to do these spectrum street epistemology videos where I'm going to ask, when I was in Eastern Europe, I would ask people, is it better to be ruled by the United States or Russia? And put them on the lines, ask them various questions, and the results were fascinating. And some of the things that people believe is the United States a force for good, and all kinds of questions about everything. So I'm going to go to Puerto Rico. I have a stint in Australia, in Sydney. I'm going to be a visiting professor there for a few weeks or a month. I'm going back. I'm a founding faculty fellow at the University of Austin, so I'm going to go there and teach. I'm so close to finishing my manuscript. My manuscript is about a young Socrates who roams the ancient Greek countryside and speaks to magical creatures, etc. And he foments this rebellion against the gods, all the while dealing with his anxiety, his extreme anxiety. So it's so I'm
great.
He has impossible conversations with people and creatures. So I'm working on that. And then my my next two targets. This is the first time I've said this, so here you go. My last target was something called NPR, which is the extraordinarily woke news organization, very, very prestigious news organization here in the United States. I guess the analog would be the BBC in the UK or ABC in Australia. So I'm going after Wikipedia, which is a minor thing, and then one of my flagship projects is I'm going after the wellspring, the source, the nucleation point of the insanity, which is colleges of education, teacher training programs, because this is the vehicle by which the ideology replicates. And so I'm going
do you have any idea why? Like I asked you about the college educated white women. Why do you think it is that the institutions of higher learning have become the nucleus of this whole movement?
Oh, that's an easy question to answer. Unlike your last one, I had no idea. It's because they are, and actually, James Lindsay from New Discourses has done some wonderful work on this. I've written about this too. It's because the purpose of education has changed. The purpose of education in virtually every college. Okay, let's take a step back. If one wants to teach in, at least in this country, I can't say about South Africa, but in the United States, if one wants to teach in K through 12, kindergarten through 12th grade, you
Mhm.
need a teaching certificate. You can't just walk in there because you've published a lot or you have a PhD or anything. No, you need a teaching certificate. You get teaching certificates from colleges of education. Colleges of education have changed the purpose. Their purpose, they're predicated upon one book. Paulo Freire was a Brazilian educator, The Pedagogy of the Oppressed. He written subsequent books on 1985. That was 72, 1985. But anyway, it's all predicated upon teaching to free people from oppression, right? So when you understand this, that the purpose of education is to liberate, to develop a critical consciousness, a consciousness of things. When you understand this, you understand, I don't know if you saw that video of the teacher bragging that they're passing out butt plugs to 14-year-olds and drag shows for children.
It's dean
Again,
of a college or a high school or something.
yeah, that's right. And the principal subsequently posted posted on social media that they support him, et cetera, et cetera. But when you understand that the purpose of education is not to give people tools to enable them to find the truth, these folks believe they already have the truth. They believe it's in liberation from oppression. And the way that you do that is you use critical theory. You develop a critical consciousness. So this is happening in teacher training programs. And all of these people are the people who graduate are indoctrinated in the ideology, and then they go through K through 12 and they teach our kids that. They teach children that. So, and I see this with my daughter's curriculum constantly. It's infused in the whole curriculum. There's no, here's the other point, consider this carefully, but undermining this all, and this is a really important point that almost nobody talks about. Undermining this all is the idea that there are certain truths about reality based upon race and it used to be social class of the old left, but they've bartered that now for other identity factors, identity politics. And if you don't believe a certain thing, you're not just wrong, but you're a bad person. So this is really an attempt, they wouldn't say this, but this is an attempt to rob people of their cognitive liberty. For example, I've mentioned repeatedly in this podcast that I'm an atheist. I do not think that there is sufficient evidence to warrant belief in a God of gods. But if I were given that evidence, I would believe. Now, with that being said, many people hold, in fact, I'm in the minority. You and I are in the minority on this belief if you look at a global scale.
Absolutely.
I believe that people have a right to believe anything that they want. I have no desire whatsoever to, for example, this is not, everybody should have the right to freedom of conscience, a right to live their lives in the way that they see fit. And we have a movement perpetuating itself in college of education that want to rob people of their cognitive liberty. And based upon what you said before, that's one of the reasons that Christians are so supportive of us in this, because this is a battle about liberty. That's why those terms right and left are really no longer applicable. This is about people who are authoritarian or not authoritarian. This is about people who want to give people liberty and who want to rob people of liberty. And one of the ways that this perpetuates itself is in colleges of education. It's in teacher training programs. And we have to undermine their legitimacy. I mean, they're doing it to themselves, but we have to go after these things and expose the problem. I have a great video on my channel from Dr. Lyle Asher, who explains this in great detail.
You have a lot of work ahead of you.
Yeah, we're losing. But the tide is turning. Yeah.
You're taking on Wikipedia, you're taking on colleges and teachers training. I mean, this is a big deal. All the strength to you, my friend. I can't imagine a more worthy cause.
Well,
if you go down in flames, this will be a hell of a thing to go down in flames.
Thanks. It's a good thing to be 56. I'm 56. I'm not beholden to anybody. Like people used to I used to have just a truly unbelievable amount of stress and grief and anxiety in my life. Constantly complaining about me, filing false complaints. I've been investigated for everything. All these multiple investigations. I don't even know how much money they spent. You know what they found? Nothing, because there was nothing to find. It was a fucking witch hunt. But now I don't have to worry about every time someone sends me an angry letter. I sent them the email to the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion at Portland State, and they say, "Why don't you complain in as much detail as you want to them?" In other words, fuck you. So, if you want to participate in it, I welcome everybody to join. You know, this is a nonprofit thing. We can win this. And you know, you're right. Musk has bought Twitter. That's changing. People are not afraid to speak up anymore. Almost everybody realizes that this is a deranged ideology. Almost everybody who's not caught in the wake of it. So now the thing is, we have to fight back. We have to fight back. And don't worry about not fighting back. You're going to lose your friends or what have you. Your friends will respect you more, not less, if you speak openly and honestly to them. And if they don't, those friendships were not friendships of virtue, and they're not worth keeping.
And don't apologize.
Never
Never give an inch to these lunatics.
Nothing. Zero.
I can't really end on a better note than that. So I think that's a perfect place to wrap it up. Peter Boghossian, it's such a pleasure to speak to you.
The honor is mine.
Again, I'm delighted to have a bit of your time and your excellent brain. It's like food for the
thank you,
for the soul. Listen, keep doing the good work. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas and New Year, and let's get together in the new year and start again.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Great to see you. Thank you.